Triumph IAS. It's a daily mains practice question and answer series. This program is exclusively designed for UPSC CSE aspirants. In this video discussion, we will discuss UPSC CSE mains previous 25-year questions. Question number 1. Why was there a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid-18th century? Give reasons. Let's start with the introduction of the answer. Starting from the 1760s, British India experienced recurring devastating famines caused by both natural factors and the indifference of the British colonial administration's economic and administrative policies. These famines led to the tragic loss of over 85 million Indian lives, primarily affecting regions that now constitute Bihar, Bengal, Jharkhand, and others. Some notable instances. Main body of the answer is number 1. Exploitation of peasants' economic resources. After acquiring Diwani rights in 1765, the East India Company escalated the revenue demands from 1/10 of the agricultural produce to a staggering 50%, leaving peasants with minimal resources to procure grain seeds for future planting. Number 2. Agricultural commercialization. Farmers were coerced into cultivating cash crops like cotton, opium, and indigo, which reduced the cultivation of food grains, exacerbating the likelihood of famines. Number 3. Deindustrialization. The decline of the industrial sector resulted in heightened unemployment and added pressure on agricultural activities, as many individuals relied on farming for their livelihoods, intensifying the impact of famines. Number 4. Misguided priorities of Governors General. During the devastating famine of 1877, Lord Lytton held the opulent Delhi Darbar, and Lord Linlithgow diverted essential supplies to the military during the Bengal famine of 1943. Number 5. Prohibition of food storage. The company prohibited farmers from stockpiling food grains to prevent tax evasion, forcing them to borrow funds at exorbitant interest rates from moneylenders to release their grain stocks. Number 6. Confiscation of food reserves. The British government would seize food stocks during revenue collection, leaving riots, farmers, with no alternative but to borrow money from moneylenders at usurious interest rates to retrieve their grain stocks. Number 7. Drain of wealth. A significant portion of India's finances was siphoned off to maintain Britain's armed forces and finance its overseas military campaigns. For instance, Lytton allocated Indian revenues to fund his ill-fated Afghan war. Number 8. Fraudulent famine grant. Funds intended to prevent a recurrence of the 1876 to 1978 famine catastrophe were largely allocated to constructing protective railways and paying interest on Indian Midland and Bengal Nagpur railways, rather than famine relief. Number 9. Inadequate relief measures. The British famine codes were inadequately implemented to provide relief to the afflicted population. Number 10. Feed the English, starve the Indian attitude. Despite an overall food surplus in India, during severe famines, substantial quantities of food grains were exported from the country. For example, the devastating 1876 to 1979 famine affected nearly the entire southern, western, and northern regions of India. Number 11. Belief in the Malthusian principle. Lord Lytton, a staunch adherent of the Malthusian principle, prioritized financial frugality and assigned Sir Richard Temple to oversee the avoidance of unnecessary expenses on relief efforts. Number 12. Monsoon failures. In 1899, the central regions of India experienced monsoon failures, leading to crop losses across a vast area and impacting nearly 60 million people, resulting in food crop failures and livestock casualties. Number 13. Disease outbreaks. The famine of 1770, while initially characterized by a food shortage, was compounded by outbreaks of communicable diseases like malaria and smallpox, exacerbating the suffering of the population. Conclusion of the answer is the British exploitative policies and natural disasters resulted in many famines since mid-18th century, due to which villages were completely wiped off the map as almost all of their inhabitants died and lakhs of Indians were forced by starvation to sign up as indentured labourers. The famines could only be controlled after independence with the formation of a responsible government. Question number 2. Right of movement and residence throughout the territory of India are freely available to the Indian citizens, but these rights are not absolute. Let's start with the introduction of the answer. Number 1. Freedom of movement, Article 19, 1d, within Part 3 of the Indian Constitution encompasses the fundamental right to freedom of movement. It ensures that Indian citizens have the liberty to travel unrestricted within the nation's borders. This right is safeguarded against state intervention but not against actions by private individuals. Number 2. Freedom of residence, Article 19, 1d, intersects with Article 19, 1e, which affirms that every Indian citizen possesses the right to reside and establish residence in any region of India. Main body of the answer is reasonable restrictions. Article 19, 5 of the Constitution outlines two justifications for imposing reasonable restrictions, namely the welfare of the general public and the safeguarding of the interests of any scheduled tribe. Protection of interests of any scheduled tribe. The limitation on outsiders entering tribal areas serves to preserve the unique culture, language, customs, and traditions of scheduled tribes. It also aims to protect their traditional livelihoods and assets from exploitation. Public health and public morals. The Supreme Court has ruled that restrictions on the movement of prostitutes can be justified on the grounds of public health and in the interest of public morals. Additionally, the Bombay High Court has upheld limitations on the movement of individuals affected by AIDS. Reasonable restrictions. Under Article 19, 5, the state has the authority to impose reasonable restrictions based on two criteria: the welfare of the general public and the protection of the interests of any scheduled tribes. Example: the inner line permit system is enforced in the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Mizoram, and Manipur. To illustrate this, important judgments related to freedom of movement and residence. Times Dhan Bahadur Ghorti v. State, 1952. In this case, a custom of a tribal area that does not allow Nepali or any foreigner to stay in that tribal area without the permission of the Deputy Commissioner was upheld to protect the interests of tribal people. Times Kharak Singh v. The State of UP, 1962. In this case, unreasonable surveillance and domiciliary visits by police not authorized by any law and thus held to be violative of the right to freedom of movement. Times State of UP v. Kaushalya case, 1964. In this case, the Supreme Court held that the right of movement of prostitutes may be restricted on grounds of public health and in the interest of public morals. Conclusion of the answer is the right to reside and the right to move freely throughout the country are complementary and often go together. The restrictions on these rights may have created many legal disputes, but they are quintessential for preserving public morality and cultural ethos of indigenous communities. Question number 3. What are the major challenges of public distribution system, PDS, in India? How can it be made effective and transparent? Let's start with the introduction of the answer. The Public Distribution System, PDS, is a government-backed network of stores responsible for distributing essential food and non-food items to economically disadvantaged segments of society at subsidized rates. The PDS is an Indian program for distributing food grains, administered by the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. Main body of the answer is 1. Identification of beneficiaries. The Public Distribution System, PDS, faces significant challenges in accurately identifying eligible beneficiaries. Approximately 65% of exclusion errors and 25% of inclusion errors occur within the PDS. 2. Outdated data. Outdated 2011 census data is currently being used to determine state-wise coverage under the National Food Security Act, NFSA, leading to the exclusion of over 10 crore eligible beneficiaries from the PDS. 3. Procurement issues. The open-ended procurement of food grains has resulted in shortages in the open market. 4. Storage problems. Inefficient storage systems have led to the spoilage of food grains, causing financial losses to the government. 5. Food grain leakage. Leakage of food grains occurs during transportation and through black market activities in fair price shops. For instance, there is a 36% leakage of PDS rice and wheat on a nationwide basis. 6. Lack of crop diversification. Farmers' preference for growing MSP-supported food grains like rice and wheat has hindered crop diversification efforts. 7. Environmental concerns. The cultivation of water-intensive crops, such as rice, has led to a significant decline in the water table, averaging 33 centimeters per year from 2002 to 2008. 8. Rural-urban disparity. Historically, the PDS has been predominantly urban-focused, and there are also challenges in providing access to migrant laborers. 9. Food subsidy burden. The implementation of the NFSA 2013 has significantly increased the burden of food subsidies. The food subsidy bill for 2020 to 2021 surged from the estimated 1.15 lakh crore to 4.22 lakh crores in revised estimates. 10. Food wastage. The United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, reported that enough food to feed 8 crore people has been wasted in Indian godowns. Conclusion of the answer is, with around 22% of BPL population living in India, effective food grain distribution system is sine qua non for ensuring food security. Integrating the PDS with other interventions including those that will increase transparency and accountability may increase its potential to realize every citizen's right to nutritious food while propagating good health.